Right, ladies and gentlemen, and with that, it's time for a very, very interesting panel discussion. Transformations through design, inspiring new value creation across sectors. Now, to spearhead this conversation, we have with us architect Puran Kumar, founder Studio PKA, who, in fact, as we all know, is someone who established PKA, the design studio, in the year 1993, and now a well-established practice providing complete design solutions in the interior architecture. Now, the studio, in fact, has a wide spectrum of projects from corporate to residential, including bungalows and villas. And over the years, his design beliefs have become an integral part of PKA, enabling the studio to maintain its design standards. So this particular panel discussion will, in fact, have a very different design to itself as well, as you can notice. So I'm going to quickly invite architect Puran Kumar to please come on the stage to also set the tone and also get us to understand this design of the panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause to welcome none other than architect Puran Kumar.
Hi, can I be heard? All right, great. Sorry about those couple of minutes. I think we needed to have things in the order that we like it. And so, we have the last panel discussion for the day, I'm told, and we are here to think together, to ideate together, to recognize together, to try and see if we can take something back with us. Transformation through design, inspiring new value creation across sectors. When I read that, I had mixed emotions about it. When I say emotions, they're different from thoughts. We all, some of us over here, and us back at the studio as architects and designers, breathe design. We speak design, we discuss design all the time among ourselves, with our clients, with the people who we interact with. And in a way, we live the world of design 24/7. When this thought about transformation through design and the inspiration of values across sectors came up, we had a couple of years back a session of stories at our studio, which actually invited 3 different designers. One, a graphic designer, one, an architectural designer, and one, and I call him a photography designer, a very, very well acclaimed photographer. And the objective of that particular stories session was to see how we could explore various fields come together and aid each other and help each other in growing. Now, the objective today, when I see this subject in front of us, is pretty much the same. I think we're living in times where design has gone beyond what you know or what your skill set is. It's gone to people coming together, collaborating, and having a dialogue about how we can help each other with designing a better product or coming up with solutions which maybe would have been unheard of till some time back. So we have an interesting panel, an interesting evening ahead of us for you people. We have 6 of the panelists. I think one gentleman is not here, but we will go through their brief introduction, and I'll invite each one of them who are right here to come up as I speak their name, and we will then hear their thoughts on a certain flow of this panel discussion. First up, I'd like to invite Dr. Ananya Gandotra. Ananya happens to be the Head of the Design, Engineering and Sustainability at Birla Estates. Ananya, would you please join us? Please, a round of applause for your panel members today. She's experienced more than 25 years in the field. Ananya, welcome to the stage. I think you're here. And she's working with domestic and international design management projects across India, China, and Dubai. And correct me if there is, well, there's much more, but to sum it up. Well, welcome here, Ananya. Next up, we have Arjun Rathi. Arjun is a young architect and a designer. He is an industrial designer who has taken lighting design as one of the areas where he has got his expertise in. Arjun, welcome. Please take a seat. His studio, established in 2012, has, as I said, lighting as one of the design expertise. Smaller objects put together to mass produce with craftsmen and manufacturers. That happens to be the core of the practice that Arjun heads. Bob is not here, Bob Atwal. He is the RSP design consultant. Maybe he'll join us in a while, but we'll move on. Kapil Gupta, next up, Serie Architects. Uh, Kapil has done his post-graduation from AA London. He's co-founder and principal architect of Serie Architects, exhibited at Hong Kong University, Shanghai Architecture Gallery. Welcome, Kapil. You are here. He was also a director of UDRI at one point in Mumbai that I got to know through this information. And also, his is the first entry in the Venice Biennale, Architecture Biennale in 2006. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So congratulations there, Kapil, but welcome to the panel. Reza Kabul needs no introduction. Mr. Reza Kabul, founder of Reza Kabul, established 1988. Reza, welcome here, please. So design philosophy of liberating spaces. I think that's short and sweet. Projects across all over the world, USA, India, Mauritius, Sri Lanka, Sudan, I can go on. But well, Reza, so good to have you here on this panel. Last, definitely not the least, Ruchika Grover. Ruchika Grover is the founder and creative director of Odyssey. She loves stone, as she tells me, and I think stone loves her too. Ruchika, welcome. Welcome to the panel. She is research and development investment in the latest technologies. I think she's taking her company to different levels. She's exhibited in art shows in Miami in 2017, if I'm right, and New York in 2018. That's what the information here is. So wonderful, super to have all of you guys here. I wish Bob joins us too, but as we talked about, we're going to explore and discuss the overlaps that we have, the intersections that we have between various design fields, between the creative fields that we're talking about. So we are architects, we are developers, we are project heads, we are stone designers and lighting designers, space designers, I think, sound designers. Now, the whole objective here is to see how it's 2020, how all these creative fields actually come together, and do they have an engagement of designers from various fields and various industries? Do we see that actually happening, or are we just talking about various design fields coming together? So I really want to hear the thoughts, whether is there a real feeling about the design fraternities coming together and working in collaboration, or are we just talking about it and this remains a dream? Arjun, I may want to start with you. Since you own a multidisciplinary practice, your comments on this.
Sure. So I think in terms of most fields of design, collaboration has become extremely important, and learning from each other's sort of discipline across the creative fields is also very, very important. In terms of design in general, I think the boundaries tend to blur a lot, where it's visual design, space design, or even in general interactive design. So I think there is a lot of cross-collaboration that's happening right now that is driving design thinking in general right now. And I think we can sort of see that across our cities, how our cities are slowly changing visually, at least in terms of marginally as such over there, how spaces are being sort of thought of through the lens of how people use them as well, in terms of interactive design. So I think in terms of collaboration, I think that is the way to go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Arjun. Ruchika, may I please ask you, do you really find the way you are placed at the moment with your skill set, your design with stone, do you find the collaboration with the designers, with the architects, with the developers really being a reality, or do you think it's just something on paper, or it's a thought that is still kind of getting germinated?
It was a thought initially. It's been 12 years now, and I think now we are getting a lot of opportunities to collaborate with architects and with designers. And I've realized that when we are able to collaborate, because I work with dimensionality, because all my work is digitally fabricated. So when I collaborate with architects, when I collaborate with lighting designers, the product which is delivered is just phenomenal. We did a building right now where we did the entire facade of the building for a developer, in fact, and we worked on the dimensionality, and we worked with the architect not just about the look of the aesthetic of the building, but also how much light was going to be coming in which part of the building. And based on that, we designed the lattice perforations, we designed the module. Because it was a developer, we had to work on the cost. So we developed about 15 different modules of what could be used where. And then we worked with the lighting designer, and the result is phenomenal. And I think this was an architect who wanted collaboration. He understood our expertise as being specialized stone fabricators.
Oh.
And we were able to develop it in a certain amount of time. We got in a landscape architect involved. We got in Hilti because it was a project based in Surat. So, we had to work with wind and just the sea salt content which was in that and all of that. If it weren't all of us coming together, we would have never been able to deliver that project. And it's very, very important. I think collaboration, and when you do collaborate, you deliver the best things. That's
Wonderful.
what I feel.
Ananya, I'd like to hear you here, since, allow me to say this, that you represent the developer community on this panel. Do you think collaborating with experts in design, let's just say stone design or lighting design, adds value to projects that you envisage? How do you actually see the sentiment among developers? What would you want to say there?
I would say, at least the top developers, we do understand there are various different specializations. So somebody who spent his lifetime looking into light will obviously give us much higher value in terms of design, and not just to us, but also to the end customer.
Arjun hasn't spent a lifetime yet, though. He's a young man.
Yeah, meaning, of course, whatever time. So they're like looking into that field of
Yeah, sure.
and
sure.
that particular design field, right? And they're wanting to specialize, and they're giving their best into that focus area. So we as developers, like at least I could say for us in Birla, there is always sometimes a resistance. They say, why can't the architect not design the facade, for example?
Right.
So we say, no, it is okay, it's their concept, but we need a facade consultant, an expert to do it. Just for facade, for example, we'll have to work at least with 3 or 4 agencies, like the vendor later on, and the facade testing companies, and so on and so forth. So this is the age for super specialization, and I'm very happy to know that there are specialists now in stone. Because usually what happens is when the design comes, then you go into the vendors and you find out, but if there are people who are even specializing in stone, I think it's a very welcome thing.
Sure. So you are all for collaborating on expertise.
Extremely. Like I would say, even for example, structures, we would go into, there are
Obviously.
2 or 3 type of structural people. You'll have the geotech guy, you will have the main structural person. The list goes on and on. We'll take the IT specialist, even we working with security consultants from Israel, for example.
Sure.
Because they are the best. So we do find the best in the field, and we want to work with them.
Wonderful. That sounds promising. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Reza. In your projects, do you engage design fraternity that is varied? That's got across the board. You have every aspect of design. Do you really engage them very, very proactively?
Let me start with going back a little bit. When I started my practice,
Anji.
the client came to you, and you were Mr. Know-all. You were supposed to know everything. You were the architect, and you were supposed to know everything, and you were supposed to do the lighting, you were supposed to do the landscaping, the sculpture, everything was there.
Exactly.
And Reza, sorry to just interrupt, and you were supposed to be good at estimation as well.
Absolutely.
So the first question is, how much is going to cost,
Absolutely. So you were supposed to be the Mr. Know-all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at that time, there was a total different perspective what an architect should be. Today, it is, the concept, as she rightly pointed out, the concept is the architect's concept, but then there is an expertise that are to go into that, to implement it, and then it has to be sustainable as well. So integration, collaboration is the need of the hour. When you go for a project today, you have the battery of consultants that come in. Earlier, we used to design the building, we used to just give it to the RCC consultant or the MEP consultant, and they used to come in and they used to put in their thing. Today, it's not that way. When we start designing a building, you get the structural consultant in, you get the MEP consultants in, so you integrate all of them, and then plus the softwares that we're using, all the Revit softwares, so everything gets integrated, and you can, get the end product, which is much better and faster, so you can. And the magnitude of the projects also has gone up. Earlier, the projects were smaller size. Today, we got, mixed-use projects, where in one building itself, you've got so many users. So you have to have everybody integrated.
So I have to bring this back to design, if you may allow me, Ananya and Reza. I think somewhere the discussion went towards the expertise, but the expertise of the structural kind or the services kind is one area. What we really want to hear about is design expertise. Kapil, if you can let me know your thoughts. Design expertise as part of your design. Now, it's a bit of a hit on the architect's ego, if you allow me to say
Absolutely
that.
not. I think that a time will come when architects will have to keep their egos in their pocket because it's not very far
I
away.
wanted to hear that. I wanted to hear this bit.
It's really not about this. I think historically, when you really think about the role of the architect starting way back when it was formalized during the actual Renaissance, architect was actually emerged from a guild, a system of basically craftspeople, where you had the architect as a master builder.
Right.
Where the architect really understood every aspect of the building. He understood engineering, he understood structure, he understood how to kind of put things together, because implicit in that way of building was the grammar and the logic of the structure and the engineering. We, of course, live in times where buildings are incredibly complex, and it's almost impossible for the architect to be the repository of that amount of knowledge. Also because in this day and age, we actually measure the performance of buildings. We actually are interested in how much load can they take, kind of environmental issues. So collaboration is going to become very, very important, and it's going to be intensified, if you ask me, by something completely different, which is actually kind of environmental.
I agree with you. Collaboration is the need of the
No, but
hour.
the point that I'm making is that environmental resilience is fundamentally now going to drive design.
Yes.
Right? Because we don't realize, I don't wish to sound like, a Greta Thunberg. I mean, she's amazing. But the point at the end of the day is that, for example, if I may sound alarmist, but if I were to tell you, say, by 2050, 60% of the island city is going to be underwater. Now, it just sounds like fiction, like, oh my God, how is that even possible? And there is real-time, let's say, data that's going to actually support it. So you're going to have a climate which is far more aggressive. The kind of basically wind forces that you actually worked with will no longer be relevant.
They're working against.
You're going to have a huge issue in terms of expertise, in terms of, I think as practitioners, as experts, we're going to have to learn as we go along to deal with the changing climate.
Sure.
And in that matter, collaboration, expertise, being able to understand how do you begin to, let's say, design for climate, let's say, resilience is going to drive collaboration.
Right. So thanks for that. I'm going to come to the next question also and start with you, Kapil. It's about, okay, not a question, it's a thought. The influence of these collaborations that we're talking about on architecture, on design in principle. And where I want your particular thoughts, your specific thoughts are the innovation through technology, the tech and innovation, and its crucial role in expanding what we do, in expansion of our vision, our thoughts. If you have your input.
Technology is actually critical, right? I mean, if you really ask me, all of our work today is about pushing net zero energy buildings, about imagining how can we build with carbon, it's negative materials. It's not going to be far away where a building will have a carbon rating based upon the amount of energy that it actually consumed to actually come into life. So, for example, right now we are building a structure using CLT, cross-laminated timber, because wood is the only carbon negative material, but nobody knows how to engineer this in India. So we're collaborating with people internationally to bring that kind of thinking here. But when you begin to think downstream, you actually have to also think about where you're going to grow that wood. Technology is critical because it allows you access to vast amounts of data against which you can begin to test assumptions that you make about performance.
Of course.
So a kind of technology helps you innovate in terms of or your methods and construction. It also allows you to measure, which is very important, right? To have a more empirical system by which you can actually measure the performance of your building. You already see this happening actively in let's say, markets in Germany, in Northern Europe. But in India, we still haven't felt the quote-unquote heat, so to speak, right? Which is coming. So it's just a matter of time before we will begin to do this, because not only is it in our best interests, but you'll figure that's the only way to save money.
Thank you. Thanks, Kapil. Ananya, I heard earlier in the evening you talk about technology and how can somebody brush it aside. Your thoughts on that and it as part of architecture and design. I also want to know, after your take on technology, your experience across various typologies of projects that you handle. Does the collaboration really enhance architecture? So before that, please speak on technology. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I think the people would love to hear your thoughts on that. And after that, let's talk about your experience across various typologies.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of technology, honestly, because that's the way the shift is happening, isn't it?
Yes.
Meaning there are two sides of technology that we can look at. One is what the technology is going to do to real estate, if we were talking of, because we are in a symposium for reality. So where is it going to take? So we need to understand not just whether we are using technology as a developer side to perhaps sell or design or construct or operate or whatever, that's a different aspect of technology which is completely embedded anyways, at least in companies like ours. Like design, for example, completely on BIM. We have in-house BIM platform. We are developing it. We are using Aconex to kind of share files so that the data is transparent, there is controls, and there is no leakages in data. So there is a huge amount of technology that's been embedded and being promoted by developers, because it is very lucid medium, right? There is no lots of, there's a transparency attached to a technology, and there are controls. Mm-hmm. So there is, I would say, at least from design, we all know all the top designers are in fact designing on the various different technology tools, and we have to kind of utilize it, right? All the analysis that we are talking of is all based out of technology. So design is completely on board.
Sure.
And also now we are trying to transfer, for example, when we talk of BIM, for example, we want to take it forward to construction. So large companies like L&T, they have their own large labs. So we kind of collaborate, and we want now the contractor to come on board. They to adapt a BIM platform. And when we talk to the top contractors, they will tell you it's a great enabler. Mm-hmm. Because where does it help them? It helps them to plan their logistics on site. So there are huge advantages, clash detection. If you get all your drawings and you don't really have to really depend on shop drawings later on, and going through the whole process of approvals of shop drawing, going back to the consultant, it's a massive cost saving. And I think somebody was talking about 3 slabs in a month kind of cycle. That only can happen if you have a set of documents which are clash-free. So there is a huge amount of advantages all across, like O&M manuals. If they are on BIM, it's a great advantage for the FM facility later on. Right. And we are trying to transfer that information now to the customer. So if the customer knows what kind of pump I have, what kind of air conditioning system I have, who is the vendor who supplied it, where can I go? So if those are the information, if the house is live for him, and they understand what this is all made of, and if I have a disruption, what do I do? So it's enabling the customer as well. I'm not talking completely on what the discussion has been in this forum so far on prop equity, which has been trying to kind of enable the sales and marketing. That's a very different discussion. It's been discussed today a lot.
Right.
Not touching base on that. No, the second aspect, sorry, you're taking a little more time, is where the technology is going to take our customers.
Right.
And the fact is, there are 2 things which are involved. Largely is the workspaces, which we then call commercial spaces, and the residential spaces, right? So the main problem in today's cities is commuting, right? And many companies are now going to work from home, or like kind of, we know the augmented reality is there, and it's going to really catch on fast because it has a lot of advantages. So if we want to sit in this room and we were to have an augmented kind of discussion,
discussion.
we could be
we
doing
could-
it from our office, multitasking, right? Taking care of our children or doing whatever.
Yeah.
And then you didn't need to be perhaps staying close by.
Right.
So the thought here is, where is the future going to be? For companies like developers or anybody, we need to see what is the workforce going to behave like. The new generation Z, millennials, they are like, I would say, mavericks.
Yeah.
They like to kind of have their own mind. They want to move around.
Of course.
So they are going to take over the workforce, and they are going to have a different style of working, and therefore their lifestyles will be different. So we have to adapt to that, and we have to see that future 10 years, 15 years down the line.
Okay. I want to bring the discussion back to your experience across typologies.
Yeah.
Can you tell me whether your experience of working with co-designers of various fields, has that worked across typologies wherever you've been engaged in?
I think I love to develop a great team, and before you develop a great team, you have to develop a great idea, what you want them to deliver.
Right.
So I'm a proponent of the design is going to be as good as your brief. If you know what you want from the designers, they are going to deliver it to you. And after that, you have to enable everybody. It's not just you get a great architect. You have to give him a great structural designer, MEP designers, landscape designers, so they are kind of a collaborative team.
Sure.
And it's no more just one person's baby. Like, for example, I was part of the design of this hotel, when I was in my previous avatar, and we laid a lot of emphasis on the back of house efficiencies.
Right.
Okay, Hafiz had done this project, and at that point with the GVK team and all, we laid so much of care on how we can minimize time, for example, for people who are working in this hotel to be more efficient.
Sure.
Right? So the carbon footprints and those kind of things come into being. So you use what? You use a back of house designer.
Right.
So they specialize only in back of house designing. Even architect will not design it. It will be the specialist guy who will come in and give you that kind of experience,
Sure.
how I need to design for the people who are going to operate the hotel. So there are whole loads of people who are really, really dynamic now. They have a huge global experience, and you need to collaborate effectively. So as my role would be to get that team together, so that everybody can deliver to the best of their,
So
value chain.
that's a great input. Thank you. Thanks, Ananya. Reza, I'm going to rewind this to a bit of discussion that she brought into the forum on BIM. I want to have your thoughts on BIM if your firm does get supported by BIM as solutions for projects, and what's your experience about it?
Initially, when we started with BIM, it was a big challenge because what happened is we didn't have that many operators. The architects were not attuned with that. So we started, getting few of them and just training a couple of them. But as they learned, they left. So then we said, this cannot happen. So we brought in a team, and we put everybody on training.
Same.
And we said, if you don't learn, you have to leave. So we got the whole office Revit savvy, BIM savvy, and then we saw that the next generation that we were employing, we started employing with BIM knowledge.
Lovely.
So that was this thing, and now what we're doing is all our consultants that we're working with, we say you have to have BIM so that we
Nice.
can integrate all the drawings together, and it becomes easier to this thing.
So we heard her say about its reach going down to the contractors, to the vendors. Do you find acceptability there when you go down to the people
It
who
is
actually
it
build
is yet to catch on in India, but in works like, projects we did in Dubai, the contractors are BIM savvy, and we passed on the drawings to them, and they have taken it, and they have detailed it further. If they don't have an in-house team, there are agencies whom they pass it on to, and they take it and take it up further.
Sure. Thank you for that.
Puran, can I just add one more
Yes,
thing?
of course.
I think a lot of things go by compliances.
Yes.
So there was days when we wouldn't do STP, right? Then the MOEF kind of came in, he said, you have to do this. What are you doing for? Then came the organic waste management, and so on and so forth. So the moment our approvals get on BIM, for example, if the building, for getting a building approval, you have to kind of give a coordinated BIM model
Yes.
for your approvals. I think everybody will latch on, and that will happen fast.
That will happen,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm going to go to the next section, which it talks about communication. We talk about communication. I'm back on the page where we're talking about collaboration among various design sectors. Ruchika, I'm gonna ask you this: do you think there's enough dialogue between the developers, designers, between product consultants, such as you? Do you think through Odyssey you've had an interaction, let's just say, with the craftsmen, the technical people, who actually are your backbone? They are the people who are working with you to give your vision a reality. Do you think there is dialogue between them and yourselves as consultants? And then, is there dialogue between you and architects or developers who are eventually coming together with you to give a reality to what your skill set is? Do you think there's sufficient dialogue, communication? How do we go about in that world? How do we actually make sure that an Odyssey or a Arjun Rathi design actually come together with architects like Kapil or Reza to work on projects that add value? It comes through communication, right? I want to know your thoughts on that communication or the lack of it.
There's communication if there's initiative, and if there's communication if there's a desire to deliver something which is very different. I worked with an architect where the brief was to stretch a hexagon across the skin of the facade. That's it. That was the brief. And we treated the whole facade like a skin. And we also obviously had a budget to work with. The building had to look like a sculpture. And so there was so much interaction between me and my team first, communicating to them, because all our work is based on technology. We are doing everything with CNC milling machines, everything is on Grasshopper and Rhino. So there was, all the costs are calculated based on the time spent on the machine. So there was so much interaction first with, the architect just gave me that brief, and he trusted me enough to know that I would want to deliver something which was sculptural. I had so much communication with my team to explain to them that, okay, it has to be a combination of 2D milling and 3D milling. We have to have the scale this much larger so that the time on the machine is this much, because we had different thicknesses of stone, we had different dimensionality, and all of that. So sometimes it's hard for me to communicate the vision to, even though I don't work with 3D Max and Rhino myself, I understand the software, I understand what are the capabilities. But most of the people who are working with us and who are CNC operators or they sometimes get bogged down by their own limitations in their heads. And when we make models with our own hand. So communication, and then after that communicating not just with my 3D modelers, but even the guys who are standing on the machine and making sure things are getting done, then everything is finished by hand. So every project is an experiment. And there is so much communication at every step. In fact, we struggle a lot also because there is no repetition of work, There's nothing which is like, oh, we've made this, now we just have to make 10,000 pieces of this. It rarely happens, if at all. So everything, if there was no communication between us and the architect, us understanding their requirements, their expectations, us communicating with the installers, if there is somebody else, usually it's us communicating with the lighting designers, telling them what our vision is, how the dimensionality has to be. A lot of the times, when the lighting designer is not involved, because our stone is dimensional, they just put the light on the stone right from the front, which makes it flat. Instead of uplighting or downlighting it, it just kills it.
So I'll come to the lighting designer here. Arjun, your thoughts on dialogue between a designer such as you, who's an expert in, or who's chosen to be an expert in a particular field, with the developers, the architects, your experience about that,
Right.
state of facts.
Right, so in terms of even training, also trained as an architect, when we collaborate with other designers and architects, our process starts in a very sort of a similar sort of a manner where we also try and understand the whole ethos of the space, what the designer is trying to create, try and gauge how the client's lifestyle is, because many times our lighting design is responding to how the client likes to live, how they like to work, when they like to wake up, what time do they come home, and what do they like to see. And all these factors sort of tend to start like determining form and material, what we use for the project many times. And as a studio, when we are working a lot with Indian with more of the Indian communities who are manufacturing over here. We're also trying to sort of see how what are the like limitations and capabilities of the communities to produce certain things. So these are quite a few sort of aspects which sort of get used when we work with designers over here. One of the recent examples, we're working on a chandelier in Calcutta right now, which is about 900 square feet. It was inspired from a gulmohar tree right outside the banquet. And we wanted to recreate the tree inside the banquet with casted brass and blown glass. So as a process, I think for 2 months, our studio was just making drawings through a VR headset, trying to recreate that tree into a 3D form. And for the last 1 month, we've finally been able to work with the artisans to cast those branches in brass. So trying to sort of bridge that gap between design intent and manufacturing, that's something which is what the studio's been sort of exploring.
So good to hear that. Kapil, your thoughts. I actually want you to give me an oversight on this. So you have international offices that your company manages. The functionality of these international offices and the plausibility of dialogue with various experts, various design experts. So you may be hiring a lighting designer or an acoustical engineer or design industry that aids architecture, and you very aptly put it in your opening statement. I want to know, how does the functionality of that with your various offices and your mindset, what's your experience with that?
I mean, it's fundamental. It's critical to the way that we work. I mean, if we didn't have the internet, if we didn't have these conduits of communication, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do.
Absolutely.
So I think what communication is also going to be finally about is just being able to be more and more sophisticated to almost have a seamless experience across space and time. It's only a function of time before that happens. And I think that's important because it's going to save you, again, more carbon, right? I mean, in Sweden, there's actually something called flight shame, that people will not fly anymore because they believe they're just kind of burning too much. And I think that's the beauty of technology and communication, is that it is going to enable us to do a lot more, a lot faster. So whether it's, talking to your engineers, whether it's talking to your consultants, your designers, it's so easy today, as opposed to the way that it was earlier. So we are an office, we're dispersed in 3 locations, Bombay, London, Singapore, but at the end of the day, Skype is just on all the time, right? So you're constantly aware of what's happening in another office, and they're aware of what's happening in your office, and
sure.
You're kind of conversing as if you kind of share the same space.
I'm going to stretch this slightly more, Kapil. I want to know, so let's go beyond Serie architects. I want to know your thoughts on whether there is presence of dialogue in that area among various design fraternities.
Oh, of course, it absolutely has to be. So when you talk about, let's say, technology, you're talking about information sharing platforms where all consultants upload information onto a common site. It's easy to access, it's easy to manage, it's easy to track. Where you're using kind of, let's say, real-time models that you're updating in 2 or 3 different locations. Your consultants are working on those models as well. So absolutely, I mean, I just think through software, through technology, you're able to do so much,
sure.
Which was not possible earlier.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Kapil. I'm going to move on to the last section of this discussion. I want to know, see, we have this, I think by and large established, everybody's on the same page that there is need for collaboration, there's need for expertise, there's need for coming together to make the projects richer, solutions more imaginative, more viable. We all on the same page. What I really want to understand is whether the designers and developers are actually collaborating, and does it bring a social impact? Does it actually trigger something in the social scenario, in the social world, in the kind of world that we're living in? I want to know your thoughts, Ananya, if you have something to share there.
Yeah. Again, I will just speak from our company's perspective, also as an individual perspective.
Sure.
Is we are really looking at consultants who look at sustainability as the only way ahead, right? And therefore, what you call it as a circular design, that when somebody is looking at design, it has to be a great design. That's absolutely necessary because that is what is going to be going to the market and we are going to use it to sell a product and things like that. But that design house or designers who are coming on board, how sensitive they are to the selection of materials, to the lifetime of the materials, and so on and so forth. So that is to be a very critical factor that we look at when we kind of try and collaborate with whichever designers we want to do. Like, for example, in the lighting design, I was just reading today in one of the online magazines that tungsten, for example, is the most finite resource at the moment, and tungsten is used a lot by lighting designers because it's the best medium to create a wow element.
Absolutely.
You know, every lighting designer would like to use a tungsten except, besides the LED. But now the challenge is how to create the same ambience with an LED, for example. So the fact of the matter is we want our designers or co-partners to be understanding that they are working with a medium which is a resource, right, a natural resource, and they have a responsibility towards it. For example, what kind of concrete they are using? Are they using the most efficient concrete for that place? Can we replace rebar, like, with a secondary rebar, and so on and so forth. So there has to be that element of responsibility, or I would call it stewardship.
Sure.
So our collaborations with the designers have to be not just for a design, which sells wow in the market, but even the customers are now looking for it.
Sure.
Because they are also aware, the climate, as Kapil was talking, is the biggest fear that we have. We have to go to net zero. How do we approach net zero? So there's other various different issues that we want to do, and developers like us at least are absolutely wanting to work with people who have that built into their kind of, I would say, those stakeholders should be aware of these factors and should be inherently been incorporating it into their designs.
Well, thank you for those thoughts. Reza, your thoughts on social impact of these collaborations across the design fraternities?
Sorry, I got lost.
You can take a second. I'll repeat my question.
Yeah,
So,
sorry. No, I was
Thank you, Reza.
what she was saying, and then I got.
So I think we've all understood the importance, the significance of collaborating among various design fraternities. We want to understand, does this aspect of the collaboration between the developers and the designers, various designers, or the architects and the various designers, does that have a social impact according to you? Does it have a positive or a negative social impact, or no impact whatsoever?
No, it does have an impact. Like, let me share one of the projects that we're doing. It's a hotel, and we are the architects there, and we are the interior designers as well.
Right.
But the client wanted a different kind of a restaurant in the hotel. And so he brought in a specialized designer who does only restaurants. So we went ahead, we collaborated with him because he's specializing in that field. So we just go ahead, there's no ego to it, there's nothing in it. You're good at something, we take that input. I'm good at something, I put in, he's good at something, so we take it, we collaborate, and we get the best result. That's the this thing is that the end result should be the best.
Exactly. So you work towards the project, towards the best of the project. Arjun, social impact?
Yeah, so I think for someone who's working more on the product and the micro space, I think our most collaborations sort of start out with the artisans and the production communities and how you strengthen them. I mean, like most recently, like I had a glass manufacturer in Firozabad who we worked with a lot, and he wanted a really expensive glass lathe machine. And as a design community, we sort of spoke to 6, 7 glass artists across the country, and we've been able to raise a lot of funding for him to buy that glass lathe machine.
Mm-hmm.
And what that helps is he's able to uplift his quality of product, what he delivers to us, which then we try and sell to somebody like you. And I think strengthening the art and craft communities with technology is something which is a very sort of a strong movement right now. And seeing value in what is being created through that movement is something what like developers have to start acknowledging.
Right.
Over here. And I think that is, that's going to help sort of the whole community grow and sort of strengthen itself.
Good, thank you. Ruchika? Do you think this is socially relevant, collaborating with the architects and coming together as designers?
Absolutely. So we also work with artisans, stone artisans, and it speeds up our process. Like because there are a lot of projects which come our way where the drawings will take a few months, but the delivery of the project has to be in 2 days.
Immediately.
You know, we have to
We all know
carve
that.
stone and make a monument in 2 days. So unfortunately, that's not the kind of work which we are able to achieve with artisans, but machines allow us to do that. So we did a project with the government where we 3D scanned a whole monument in Sanchi, the Toran Gate, and we got in the artisans after the installation had happened to finish everything on site. And we now have been working with these artisans who initially, like when they started, and some of them are national award winners, you know, and they don't have work. But because they have been associated with our company, now they're practically employed with us, you know, even though they're on a contractual basis, they're practically employed with us, and we ensure that there's something handcrafted, because there's a whole new different look which comes when you're combining machining and hand craftsmanship, and we try to, you know, bring that forth through our sculptures and installations. And on another level, also we try and collaborate with architects. So if we do facades or something, and the cutouts which are left over of the perforations, we use that in some way or the other always, and incorporate in some way in the landscape or maybe the design of the building. We are also currently working on developing a 3D printer of all the waste of the dust which comes out, so that we can develop sculptures and, you know, we can use whatever waste comes out. So that's the social aspects which we are kind of
Thanks,
working.
Ruchika. Kapil, I'm going to come to you for the last thought of the evening before we wrap up here. I want to understand, I'm still grappling here with the thought. Think along with me and make me understand this. Social impact. We're talking about social impact. We're talking about how we make the society a better place. How do we understand each other? How do we understand the need of getting things which we are assigned to do to be better? How do we actually socially, positively or negatively impact by collaborating among designers? If you can be very specific about that.
Yeah.
And you're free to tell me that there's no impact.
No. I mean, I think it's a very complicated question, right? Because we're kind of fundamentally working also as one. Unfortunately, it's always about the business, right? In a certain sense. So of course, you're working with people, you know, with your projects, etc. But how much of that comes out of a kind of social consciousness is something that is kind of up for debate. But I think it's finally about common values, right? So if you have common values and those values reside in that, your work must in some way influence and affect a much larger group of people in a positive way. I think that to me is social impact. So it happens obliquely, right? It happens obliquely in a way where you design spaces that kind of, let's say, promote a certain kind of social experience, that creates stronger communities, if you're doing housing, or, you know, which creates more vibrant, or which re-examines the way, say, your school will be designed through technology, through kind of spatial modulations to create schools of the future, which then have, in a certain sense, a bearing because they talk about how children begin to communicate. So there's always a social dimension to it.
Interesting.
You know, so I think fundamentally architecture its fundamental role is a social societal role, right? In the West, of course, it was about, the city was a welfare state where people came together for the good of everyone. The Asian city, for whatever it's worth, is the developmental city. It's a city of profit, right? It's kind of fundamentally that the city becomes a conduit to an economy, or to the imagination of an economy, as opposed to the imagination of a city. So,
That's right.
emerging a city, say, for example, in Singapore, it's because they manage their social dimension outside of the politics of how they did it. But if you look at the way that they managed the entire social realm through a incredible public housing project, to me was, now that is impressive.
Yeah.
And I think that is the social role that architecture must push, that all of us together have to actually push forward.
Well, good thought to sum this up on. I think I don't know about you people, but I have learned a lot through some great minds over here on this panel, where in this time and this age where we're looking well into 21st century, and we are in the middle of a lot of innovation, a lot of great ideas which this world is all about. I think it's time that we recognize the need to work together, collaborate as experts in various fields, and the advantages on various levels, various layers, I think is what we've heard today. And I thank you all for partaking in this conversation. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our speakers. We're going to request you all to please remain on the stage. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, may I please request Mr. Vijay Kandhari, the managing partner, B. Kandhari Group, to please come on the stage, present a token of gratitude to all of our speakers. All of you join in for a group photograph. Mr. Kandhari, I request you to please join in, all our speakers as well. And let's have a huge round of applause one more time, ladies and gentlemen, for a stellar panel over there.